So let's talk about my favorite topic, which is how to stop self-abuse. And another another way that people can recognize this behavior is self-criticism or self-judgment or what I call it self-bitchery. And the reason why it is so important to talk about it is this is probably the number one reason why we suffer constantly. And it is true also how we do that in our transitioning journey is because of this self-criticism, because of this self-abuse, we feel we cannot allow ourselves to fail, and every failure would feel so painful, so much so that we're willing to stay safe, we're willing to play safe, we're willing to keep doing what we don't want to because we cannot tolerate our own self abuse, right? So the constant thought processes, constant feelings that keep attacking our brain, all of that is what I call it a self abuse. Now, I want to talk to you about how I have done this, how I have stopped this self abuse. And I want to go through 4 steps of how this could look like as well for you if this is you. And also, before everything, I want to talk a bit about how it looks like living life where you are not your own worst enemy, right? Living life where you are not constantly attacking yourself, constantly criticizing yourself, constantly bitching about yourself to yourself, and constantly telling yourself how you shouldn't be doing this, how you should have done this, how this is a mistake, how this is this. And constantly being in that state is so exhausting. And I have done this for most of my 30s. And I would say for a long time now, I couldn't even quantify actually, but for a long time now, I have been living life where I don't have any of that, where I don't have those constant ways of criticizing or shooting myself or bitching about myself. All of that I have been able to get rid of altogether, right? So my inner state feels so like unbelievably calm from that perspective throughout the day, every day. And also, I noticed the other thing is that once I started really living my life where it's no longer the self abuse, I'm able to focus on things that I say I do. I'm able to work on things that are bigger and more courageous, more audacious, because I'm not afraid of, in the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, I will eat myself up alive. I don't have that fear anymore, right? So therefore, I'm able to go for bigger projects and feeling like I can thrive and do whatever I want to without abusing myself, without attacking myself, without being my worst enemy. And I would love for you to experience this and build the future from that place. So, if that is you, here is how I have stopped altogether my self abuse. That I don't do this and I haven't done this for a long time now. Sorry that my camera is a bit lagging. I can see that, but I hope that you can keep hearing us anyway. So, the first one is I started observing and seeing how all of the self criticism is not useful. I started observing like whatever self-criticism and self-abuse that would come up in my mind, whatever the thought processes, whatever the emotions, I would observe them, I would write them down, I would get coaching on them, I would coach myself on them. But the more I start seeing them, the more I start seeing how they're not useful in any way possible, even though my brain at some point believed that they are necessary to improve, or they're necessary to get better at something. They're necessary in whatever way my brain used to believe, or my brain used to lie to me about it. And then I realized that they were never useful. And of course, I'm not talking about those healthy criticism that we want to give to ourselves as to how we shouldn't have behaved here and instead we should have behaved here. That's totally different. But I'm talking about those self-bitchery that we just keep like nagging and keep criticizing and talking to ourselves like negatively about whatever we do. Those are the things I start seeing how they are not useful, right? The second thing, then I start realizing how harmful they were. And this is an important point for your brain to be aware of it. The more your brain is aware that it is harming itself, it's like, autoimmune disease kind of thing, right? Where your immune system starts attacking yourself. It's the more I started seeing self abuse as um, attacking myself and being my worst enemy and harming myself, the more I start seeing how much I was harming myself. Like, of course, not physically, right? But mentally in my mind, with all these thoughts, all this negative talk, the more I start seeing that this level of harming is something that I would never do to someone else. So why would I do this to myself? And then I also started seeing, I'm looking at my notes. I started seeing that those, once I started seeing how I'm harming myself, I also started seeing that I am in charge of whether I harm myself or not. Just like I am in charge of whether to harm someone else, and I would never do that to someone, then I also am in charge of whether I harm myself or not. Whether I keep talking bullshit and like I keep mistreating myself or not is really up to me. I started seeing that, right? So that's an important element for you to keep in mind, because I think a lot of the time when we keep this negative self talk, this self bitchery, we don't really see that this is within our control. We just feel like we have to keep doing it in a compulsive way, right? Like a compulsive disorder type of way. But we don't need to see it this way. We need to see it as something that we can control, something that we can do something with it, just the way that we wouldn't do that to another human being. So why on earth would we do this to ourselves? So that's the second point, is to really see that you are harming yourself and your future. And the more you start seeing it, then your brain starts getting into, oh, but why am I doing that, right? Why the hell am I doing that to myself? And then we go to the third point. And the third point is treating them as something that we can get rid of once and for all. I believe that I made a mistake of treating all of my negative self talk as something that I can't do anything about it, and most importantly, treating them as something that I could never get rid of. I thought I treated them as, this is just something I do, this is just something I've always done, this is something that I can't really get rid of, this is just something that I need to live with. All of those are not true. So that's why when you start seeing your negative self talk, when you start seeing how you are harming yourself, when you start seeing how your self bitchery is harming you, and you can do something with it, then you start also seeing that you can actually get rid of it once and for all. So treat it or approach it like it is time for you to get rid of it once and for all, right? And the way that I have approached this as I no longer want to keep having this as a problem in my life. I no longer want to be battling myself for the rest of my life, right? Essentially. I no longer want to be my own worst enemy for the rest of my life. I want to solve this once and for all, and I no longer want this to be the main story of my life. And once I started looking at it from that perspective as A, something I can control and do something with it, and B, something that I can get rid of it altogether, and C, that this doesn't need to be the main story of my life, then I started dissociating myself from this. Right. And the way that I have started dissociating is I started looking at all the self talk, all the negative self talk, as something that does not belong to me. It has nothing to do with me anymore. This is not who I am anymore. And once I started dissociating myself from that, then my brain could be like, oh, okay, now we have the bandwidth for other things, right? And then the last point, the fourth point, is I started feeling and even like having glimpse of how my life looks like without those self-bitchery moments. And once I started seeing that my life can look very flowing, very genuine, very in peace, in harmony with myself, in alignment with myself, then I started even noticing these self-bitchery talks even more, because now they were like this intruders getting into my peaceful world, right? And me dissociating myself from those became even more powerful, more doable. And then my brain automatically wanted to stay and be in the peaceful, flowing, energetically alive way, rather than constant attack of my brain, of my personality or of myself, and then constantly being in that battle. And getting out of that battle felt like this huge freedom that I never knew I could exist or I could experience. So that's why I really want for everyone who is struggling and who's going through, and especially in the transitioning, this self abuse, self bitchery exacerbates so much because we don't have the safety around, we don't have stability, we don't have maybe a job, maybe we don't have relationships to rely on, maybe we have a lot of other things going on. In such moments, our self bitchery ironically gets even through the roof, right? Instead of us being so supportive of ourselves going through this, we are the one attacking ourselves, right? And therefore, in order not to do that anymore and solve it for once and for all, these are the four steps that you could take. So I will repeat them again so that you have it as a structure to have, right? So one is start noticing how they're not useful. Even if your brain has all these great arguments as to why they're useful and how you don't like you stop growing because you're not criticizing yourself, those are all lies. So you start seeing how they're not useful, and once you start seeing how they're not useful, the second thing you start realizing how harmful they are. And the reason why they're harmful is because they keep generating a lot of emotions that will keep your emotional balance disbalanced, and therefore you are not going to go for the things you want to. You stop yourself from doing things that you haven't done before because your brain will not be able to manage to go to the unknown territories, and you keep battling yourself, right? So that's why you start seeing how harmful this is. That's the second point. And the third point, you start seeing how, if you're not doing this to other people, if you're not harming other people, then why are you harming yourself? So you start seeing that there is something you can do about it. It is actually within your control. You have a power over this, instead of like being something that just takes over you, right? And once you start seeing that you have the power over this, then the fourth point, you start seeing that, okay, if you lived life without it, how it would look like. And once you start having the glimpse of it, then you start dissociating from this and not even solving problems through self-bitchery, essentially, right? So you start like dissociating yourself and saying, this is not who I am anymore, this is not how I do things anymore. And you start going into a lane where this no longer becomes your story, this no longer becomes a constant intruder or constant suppressor of your life. And that's really what I want for you. So my dears, if you would like to work on this, absolutely let me know. And if you're doing this on your own, you know that observing, writing down, making decisions, and approaching them as something that are solvable are key points that you need to take into account as you do this. And I would even give I would even give myself a timeline, if I were you, to say, by this point I'm done with this problem and I no longer want this to be interfering with my life anymore. So let me know how this is going. Thank you so much for being with me, and have a beautiful weekend.